You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabel Denham. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. First-class fiasco, reads the front page of the Mail, as a dramatic shake-up of the Royal Mail could mean letter deliveries are cut to just 3 days a week. But on the front page of the Express, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak insists there will be no Royal Mail cutbacks under his watch. The Eye leads with the story on the ongoing post office scandal, claiming it knew a second IT system had faults but prosecuted staff anyway. The Metro leads with the head of the British Army hinting at the possible need for the reintroduction of conscription. Their headline, "Your country will need you to fight Putin." The Times leads with a story of plans for a 500,000-strong citizen army to fight off Russia should the UK go to war with a country such as Putin's. But the Prime Minister has been forced to rule out the idea of an army draft on the front page of the Telegraph. A plan to prioritise UK families in queues for social housing causes controversy. That's according to The Guardian. The Financial Times reports that the French government is calling on its British counterpart to contribute towards a multi-billion-pound shortfall in funding for nuclear power projects being built in the UK by the French energy operator EDF. And wine is a gift from God, says Pope Francis. That's on the front of the Daily Star. The main picture isn't Pope Francis. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Kevin Maguire and Annabel Denham. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the Times and this conscription that isn't really. UK should have citizen army to see off Russia. This is the suggestion that's been made, but not sanctioned by the government in any form.
No, but this has taken off since the Telegraph this morning had the study. Your General Sir Patrick Sanders, Chief of the General Staff, head of the Army, talking about the need for far more troops and that citizen army. And here, what the Times have picked up is that James Heappey, a Defence Minister, said to a podcast the figure needed could be 500,000. And it seems, which I was unaware of, that the Defence Secretary at the moment, Grant Shapps, in the event of a war or an incident, has the ability to call up everyone who's left the military in the past 18 years and under 55, which would include James Heappey himself and Johnny Mercy, the Veterans Minister. But it's, I suppose it's drawn attention on the fact that the size of the British Army is shrinking. And it's still going down. I think it's at 77,000 now. It's heading towards 70,000 within 2 years. I think the Telegraph said on Saturday.
72,500 next year.
You've had quite a rich seam of these stories. But I think we also have to just calm down. One, we're in NATO, so you would never fight Russia alone. Two, we don't have a land border, so it's not like Ukraine. And three, hopefully, we won't be in a war with Russia, but there's a Whitehall source quoted here in the Times saying perhaps we could train civilians, the training of Ukrainian civilians on UK soil could act as a mission rehearsal. I don't think people are going to be flocking, are they? I mean, look, if we paid the professional forces more, we'd probably solve the recruitment service, because it's not a particularly well-paid position, is it, if you're corporal or a private.
Annabel, do you think it's scaremongering, or is there a serious message in terms of, you know, how well served we are by our armed forces and their dwindling numbers?
Well, certainly the numbers are dwindling down to levels that we haven't seen in the UK since the Napoleonic era, and for a long time we've grown complacent about these sorts of challenges and threats that we haven't really needed to confront in recent decades. But now we have war in Europe, we have this major conflict in the Middle East, we have Chinese aggression in that region to contend with as well, not to mention the risk that Donald Trump becomes president. He has made his feelings about NATO very clear in the past, which could be generous famously described as ambivalence. And I think that there, you know, General Sir Patrick Sanders is not saying that Putin is going to try and invade a NATO country within the next 6 months, but he is saying within the next couple of decades that this is a threat that the West may need to contend with. And a problem that we have specifically in Eastern Europe at the moment is that there is a stalemate in Ukraine, that, you know, Russia, there's a risk Putin is now going to begin to feel quite emboldened, that the counter-offensive that was launched last autumn hasn't made the progress, the headway that Zelensky certainly was hoping that it might, that they have serious issues with weapons supply. And I know we're going to come on to the story about this jet that has been fired down, but there is very much at the moment a war of words going on between Russia and Ukraine. Russia seeking to dampen morale in Ukraine in the West and really sow further discord and division among the Western alliance.
Yeah, arguably, Donald Trump's a bigger threat to Britain's security than Vladimir Putin. If he's going to pull out of NATO or reduce NATO or just cosy up to Putin and say, I'm going to solve the Russia-Ukraine war within 24 hours, are you going to do that? Because you're basically going to sell out Ukraine.
Well, I hold no torch for Donald Trump, but I think he had a fair point when he said that many NATO members were failing to meet their obligations, that 2% of GDP spending on defence.
We're going to come on to that crash, the Russian plane, that crash in the metro in a while. But just to come back to the conscription and the denials from Rishi Sunak that this would ever be considered. The Telegraph looking at the story from the government's perspective.
Yes, I mean, you know, that's right. As we've said, it's not something that is going to be a realistic prospect in the near future. And there would be all sorts of hurdles for us to have to overcome were we to seriously consider conscription. What would happen to things like human rights law and health and safety laws and that sort of thing? You know, not to mention the hysteria that might accompany it and the fact that we need to ask ourselves, I think, as a nation now, how many people would be willing to fight.
If it was modern warfare with drones, you'd probably get a load of kids off their PS5s.
Well, I think that was the assumption, wasn't it? Yeah. But then look at what's happened in Ukraine. It's been far more of a 20th century type of conflict than we were expecting. That
has been the subject of many phone-ins, radio phone-ins today, as to whether this generation would be willing to fight for their country. And the answer that one of the answers that came was a resounding no. Yes, a different generation.
Well, yeah, the old national service has reared its ugly head again. I mean, it was scrapped in 1963 because it was very expensive, unpopular, and it didn't work.
Let's have a look at the Metro and the story we were alluding to earlier. And this is the jet that's crashed with 65 prisoners of war, Ukrainian prisoners on board. Russia saying that it was attacked by Ukraine. Ukraine saying that they want to get to the bottom of it, but not outwardly denying that that is the case.
No, I mean, I think, to me, the two most important words in this article are Kremlin and says, because at the moment, we simply don't know whether these claims can be taken at face value. Certainly, it's in the Kremlin's interest to suggest that Ukraine has shot itself in the foot, that it has brought down a plane carrying Ukrainian prisoners of war. But Ukraine has said that there were missiles on board this plane. We don't yet know what the destination was. We don't yet know why it was targeted. So we're back to that strong sense, I think, at the moment of, you know, a fog of war, perhaps propaganda campaigns taking place. You know, we just don't know what we don't know.
There is propaganda, but there's propaganda on both sides. And I think the Ukrainians, if they hadn't, would have come straight out at the beginning, rather than a quote saying, urging the media and citizens to refrain from spreading unverified information. I think they would know whether they'd shot that down or not. And maybe, as it says here and elsewhere,
saying tonight that, you know, they need to get to the bottom of it and go through all of the information. Perhaps they don't know.
When it's 65 of your POWs, I think you would know pretty quickly whether you'd shot down that plane. And it does seem, and I might be proved wrong, but I think the versions that seem most credible is the Ukrainians say they weren't told by the Russians that plane had their POWs on it, and so they've seen it and they've shot it down. But it's interesting now, they are increasingly firing into Russia itself. rather than just attacking Russians on Ukrainian soil.
I mean,
it seems a terrible accident.
Perhaps I do think that there are good reasons to have doubts over the Russian narrative here, not least the fact that they came out with very specific details of what had occurred very soon after, details that you'd have to question how they had that knowledge. There was talk of there being a second plane that may have had prisoners of war on it following this initial one that was shot down, that was turned back, that was diverted.
It's not inconceivable it was a trap, and Putin and the Kremlin will be rubbing their hands in glee and sacrificing their own crew and the three soldiers aboard to see so many Ukrainians killed by Ukrainians. And I think there's nothing worse in any country than a blue-on-blue attack where you kill your own accidentally.
OK, let's move on to the Metro and the coup d'etat that wasn't. Top Tories rally round the Prime Minister after that single call for him to go. Were you surprised by it, either of you?
This was another Telegraph story this morning, very good on the front. It was a treasure trove of riches. But God, what a story, though. I mean, the Telegraph's accused of being the opposition to Rishi Sunak now. There's that big poll and now Simon Clarke. But look, I think he's scapegoating Sunak because he wants to hide he was a Truss supporter and minister. But he's been hammered by people who would normally be his allies, saying he's foolish, selfish, and the popular Conservatives were Liz Truss. It's going to be, instead of 5 families, there's going to be 6. I suppose a dirty half dozen. When it launches in early February, had him as a poster boy, and now he's not going to be at the launch. I think he's gone out on a limb, and he's been abandoned.
Do you think he thought that there would be some momentum and others would join?
One can't imagine him going into this knowing that he would be a lone ranger, that no one, aside from, of course, Andrea Jenkins, who has sent in her letter of no confidence in Rishi Sunak, but that he would strike out and not have anybody follow behind him. That's not to say that matters won't change in the coming weeks, in the coming months, that perhaps there will begin to be some momentum as the true picture for the Tories just gets worse and worse. Simon Clarke, somebody who worked with Rishi in the Treasury, who a year ago called for unity in the Conservative Party. One has to take him at his word when he says nobody likes the guy who warns about the iceberg, but perhaps that's better than hitting it. There's a palpable sense that some Tories, at least, are perhaps almost in denial about.
But as you say, we shall see whether they come forth and want to put their heads above.
What he advocates would save them anyway. I mean, he is the Reform Party wing of the Conservative Party. He backed Truss and the budget that created so much chaos and mayhem and misery for people and plunged the Tories so deeply in the polls.
Well, yeah, not Rishi, then who?
We must leave it there. We've run out of time. Kevin and Annabel, thank you very much for the moment. Coming up, we'll discuss the backlash to the suggestion that the Royal Mail could cut back deliveries to 3 days a week. Do stay with us. Watching the press preview. Still with me, Kevin Maguire and Annabel Denham. Let's take a look at the Mail front page. And this is, backlash regarding the 3-day proposed delivery for Royal Mail. The Prime Minister saying that it's not going to happen on his watch, but Ofcom suggesting that in terms of cost-cutting, it would help the Royal Mail, who've lost £1 billion last year.
Yes, Royal Mail is, it's very much in the red. It's a service which is designed to deliver around 20 billion letters a year, but is actually delivering 7 billion letters a year. I was looking up earlier, and around 75% of first-class letters are arriving on time. So, something about this institution simply isn't working anymore. And initially, we were talking about the universal service obligation and perhaps needing to drop the Saturday service. Well, now it looks like, there's a push from Ofcom to reduce it even further to just 3 days a week, which I'm not sure the British public will be all too impressed with. But I say this, I don't write letters, or rarely write letters, and perhaps I do over Christmas, but, we've moved into a digital age.
You said Post Office, the Royal Mail in the red. You see what's in the pink at the top of the mill? Anyway, I mean, blimey. Anyway.
We're not doing that story,
No, we're not doing
Kevin.
that. So, blimey. Anyway, the Daily Mail. Middle England. Anyway.
Back to the Royal Mail.
Well, look,
I didn't tee that up.
Yeah, the fat cat postman Pat bought it on the cheap back in 2013. Have milked it, have moved some of the business around to make letters look like they're losing more money than they are, although they have, as you say, gone down. But this idea now you can wriggle out of your obligation and just deliver for 3 days instead of 6, and perhaps a letter will take 3 days instead of arriving the following day. They can't be allowed to do that. And it's not just for sending a card to your mum or whatever. It's so many businesses rely on it. And it's a service. It's part of the infrastructure of the country. And a lot of people will suffer if those people who bought it on the cheap, took a lot of money out, and are now moaning about it since privatisation, are allowed to get away with it. And I think Ofcom's made a mistake to go the way it's gone without consulting people who work in the industry. The Communications Workers Union, the posties weren't consulted. And
it's certainly one that you think the public would not back. And
Rishi
Sunak is...
he's denied this as well. He's had to deny conscription and a citizens' army.
On his watch.
Oh, dear.
To the Star, finally. The Pope says that wine is a gift from God. Annabel.
Yes, not quite clear if he's talking about consubstantiation or transubstantiation here, or simply the enjoyment that one can derive from having a glass of wine.
Is that the Pope on the left or the right?
But it's difficult to agree with him, the many joys and pleasures of drinking wine in moderation.
I think that's Father Jack, isn't it, from Father Ted?
Yes, from Father Ted, yes.
But we know a gift from God. Didn't his son turn water into wine in the Bible? I mean, yeah, so there's a long tradition in God's family of wine.
So you agree with the Pope? Both agree with the Pope?
Resoundingly agreeing with the Pope. And it says at the top here, just days after praising Rumpy Pumpy, the real-life claims proof for good. So that was news to me as well.
As somebody who doesn't believe in God as a sort of an atheist or a humanist on a good day, I think the Pope's trying to take credit for wine, actually.
Kevin and Annabel, thank you very much.